Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Welcome to this episode of Friday's Conversation with Ibrahim. Friday's Conversation with Ibrahim is a podcast that covers a wide variety of topics ranging from religion, philosophy, geopolitics, art, literature, psychology, general knowledge, and so on and so forth. Whatever your tastes, rest assured that on Friday's Conversation with Ibrahim, we get you covered. Welcome aboard. In this episode, we're going to look at something in religion. And this is going to be in two parts. This episode is going to be in two parts, and we shall have part one here. Now, the topic of our discussion is mental health, and specifically from the perspective of the Islamic faith. Now, to give us a prompt, before we delve into this discussion, we're going to use a prompt, and this is a verse from a chapter of the Holy Quran called Suratul Kahf. Now, just as a brief background info for you, Muslims are expected to read or recite this chapter on the eve of or on Friday. Now, the first thing you should know is reading Quran is a task that earns the reader a reward. For every letter, every word, every verse, every chapter, the more one reads, the more the reward. So this is why Muslims read or make the habit of reading Quran. Now, specifically, according to the Prophet, may peace be upon him, and we will use Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to mean may peace be upon him. The tribulation or the test of the Antichrist is regarded as the greatest tribulation mankind has ever or will ever encounter. And all the prophets, right from the first to the last, have always consistently warned their followers against this. So, other than reading the chapter, the lessons and the insights and the reflections from this chapter is what is expected to offer the Muslim protection or guidance on how to deal with the tribulations of the Antichrist. Now, specifically, there are a number of insights, lessons, and so on and so forth that we can get from this chapter, but we shall only focus on mental health because that is what our discussion shall revolve around. Now, this is the specific verse. There is the Arabic version, its transliteration and translation. So I'm going to read the Arabic version for you, and you can follow because this is right on your screen. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا. What this verse specifically talks about is the Prophet is warned against engaging in extreme grief, is warned against indulging in grief. This indulgence, according to this warning, is something that can lead to his destruction. So the takeaway here, right before our discussion, is that grief, a mental state, a psychological state, is capable of causing destruction. And so from here, we pick the significance of mental health in life. It is so important that God saw it fit to warn his prophet against this. And so we're going to look at this in this discussion. Now, just as basic facts, You need to understand that mental, neurological, and substance abuse disorders make up for about 10% of the global burden of disease, and that 1 in 7 adolescents in the world have a mental disorder. And depression is a common mental disorder, and that about 5% of adults suffer from depression. And suicide accounts for 1 in 100 deaths globally. This is about 700 people that die, accounts for about 700,000 people that die by suicide every year. And that suicide is the 4th leading cause of death. Now, what you need to understand first is suicide in most cases comes about as a result of someone feeling there is no need to continue living anymore, losing hope in life, seeing no light at the end of the tunnel. So it is this hopelessness, this despair, that leads to suicide. Of course, some people may talk of someone choosing to die because they just want to rest. But the fact that you feel the need to rest, that you feel the need, you feel that you're getting dragged down and bogged down by life and that you need to rest in itself is worrisome. And so, this is not a healthy mental state in the first place. Now, something else you need to remember is, as a basic fact, that people with severe mental disorders, they die younger than the general population. And because of this, and therefore the loss of productivity, the global economy loses about $1 trillion per year. These are just basic facts. And this is according to World Health Organization. This is from statistics provided in 2022, so this may have increased or gone up by now. Now, we've seen in the verse that we quoted earlier on that a psychological state, mental state, is so powerful and so significant that it can lead to, it can either promote good health or lead to destruction. So, why does Islam place so much significance on mental health? One, it is because one's body, and this includes the emotional, psychological state, has a right over a person. We can glean this from an episode that happened between 2 companions of the Prophet. There is a gentleman, a companion of the Prophet called Abu Darda. He wanted to fast continuously. And Salman al-Farisi, another companion, advised him against engaging in this. And this is on the basis that, yes, total submission, engaging in worship, lots of acts of worship is, yes, good. However, it should not be at the expense of one's body, because the body has a right over the person. So this is the first thing. This is the first reason why mental health is significant in Islam. And if you look at the Islamic law, one of the things that the Islamic law is expected to protect is the intellect. When we talk of the intellect, we talk of psychology, we talk of the mental ability, we talk of the emotional state. So Islam is expected to protect this. Its law, its norms, its code of regulation is expected to protect this. Now, our mental state, our psychological state, has a great influence on our perception of ourselves. How we perceive ourselves. Whether we attach value or not to ourselves greatly depends on our mental state. And this is where we talk of low or high self-esteem. So our mental state controls this perception. And this can lead to a person either being functional or dysfunctional. And our mental state also influences our relationship with our Creator. Not just about perception of ourselves, but also about how we relate to the Creator, how we relate to fellow human beings, and how we relate to the environment. It is quite a significant matter. For instance, someone with low self-esteem, someone that is in emotional distress, may suffer from low self-esteem, and as a result may be aggressive or timid, and therefore have a problem relating with people, and may not pay attention to their hygiene and the environment in which they live, and as a result may not be in the best mental state to serve their Creator. And so, this is quite significant. And finally, if you speak to doctors, you will discover that a great deal of our physical well-being is controlled by our mental well-being. Sometimes, the problems that we have internally with our emotions, with our psychology, is manifested in a physical ailment. And so because of these things that I've just mentioned, Islam places great significance on safeguarding our mental health. Now, we've seen from the beginning God directly telling the Prophet to be careful with his mental health. We've also seen how and why Islam places great significance on mental well-being. But why is there so little attention? Why do you hear so little from the pulpit, from the preachers, the scholars, and so on and so forth? Or why is the society not so keen about discussing this? Now, the first thing we need to mention is misconception. There is misconception amongst the average people, and even some people with some Islamic education, that mental disorder or illness is a signal of deficiency in faith, in Iman. Since this is a great thing, if you're mentally unwell, then it means, according to this misconception, of course, I'm not saying it's right, it is not, that is what you need to understand, but this is a misconception that most people have, that if you're mentally ill, then your Iman too is weak. And because of this, it is a sensitive matter, and therefore people are not comfortable discussing this. And there is also a stigma from another front. Culturally, in most of our cultures, mental illness is seen as a curse, or resulting from a curse, and as a sign of bad omen, in opposition by evil spirits. Socially, people that are mentally unwell are also seen to be crazy and therefore out of control, and no one would want to be seen as such. And so no one would want anyone of theirs to be seen as such. And so it's a very sensitive topic that people would want to really avoid discussing unless it is extremely necessary. And finally, whatever we do with our lives, from the simple task of brushing our teeth, combing our hair, taking a shower, we didn't just get into them, we were taught. Somebody taught us that brushing your teeth is good practice, eating, taking a shower, washing your clothes, and so on and so forth. So these things were deliberately taught to us. However, when it comes to mental health, safeguarding it, discussing it, noting it, and dealing with it has not been taught as such. Because of the misconceptions that we previously mentioned, because of the stigma that we previously mentioned. And so, it is not automatic that we get into this and talk about them and discuss them and deal with them. These are some of the things, of course, but there are others that we can't mention for now. Now, I think when we were talking about why there is so little attention given to mental health, we identified misconception regarding faith as one of the things leading to this. So the question is it really a signal of deficiency of faith, like most people believe? Here we're going to look at examples of prophets, people that had high standing when it comes to religion, people that had high standing in the eyes of the Creator, His messengers. We look at their lives and we look at episodes of distress, mental health challenges, and despair. Because when we talk about mental health, we're talking about stuff like anxiety, panic, grief, depression, and so on and so forth. So we look for examples of this in the lives of illustrious people, respectable religious figures, prophets. Let's start with the prophet Ayub or Job. Now, Prophet Ayub went through distressing moments in his life. He lost his wealth, resources, family, health, until he became an outcast. And this persisted for years. According to some reports, over 18 years. He was so distressed. He was so challenged by what he was going through that he even had conflict with his own wife. She was the only one that stuck by him all through. Now, he reached a point where he cried out to Allah. One of the greatest dua or prayers for someone in distress is the dua of the Prophet Ayub, where he mentions that he mentions and cries out to Allah that he is distressed and that God is the most merciful. He should shower him with mercy. This is the Prophet Ayub. The second, Prophet Yunus or Jonah. When he was upset by his people, he took off. He had a problem on the ship that he was on, and he was thrown overboard and swallowed by a whale. Now, in the darkness, in the depth of the darkness, vast sea, huge creature in the stomach of such a huge creature, great darkness. he despaired and he cried out to Allah. And his prayer is also one of the greatest prayers that people that are going through distress and moments of distress, moments of depression or stress are encouraged to use to ask for relief from their Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet Moses, when he committed a crime and therefore had to flee for his life, he ended up in a town, in a place where he knew no one and had nothing. In such a hard time, he cried out again to Allah. His prayer, acknowledging his state, distress, and anxious and miserable state, acknowledging this, he cries out to Allah for help. The Prophet Jesus, or Isa alayhi salam, when people were looking for him to get him crucified, he cried out to God. This is quite a famous episode in the Bible. And then finally, the Prophet Muhammad. And we've just seen at the beginning of this episode how God was warning him against engaging in grief that might lead to his destruction. So these very important, very significant personalities, very close people to the Creator, the Creator's choice as messengers, they went through these distressing moments. Psychological crisis. If a psychological crisis is a sign of deficiency of faith, then the assumption is a great abomination. Because what it concludes is these persons had deficiency in their faith, which is not correct. So, I guess this has us covered about this misconception. Now, does it seem like there is an upsurge recently, an upsurge in mental health related cases? Does it seem like whenever you turn right or left, you're likely to encounter someone experiencing some mental health crisis, psychological crisis? Why does it seem so? Is it on the increase now compared to how it was when we were young and growing up 10, 20, or 30 years ago? Now, the first thing we need to mention is the fact that we're not aware, for example, 10, 20, 30 years ago, the fact that we were not aware of this doesn't mean it didn't really exist. It may have existed. It's only that we are now more aware because of increased access to information. So these are two possibilities. There might be increase, or there may not be any increase at all, but increased awareness. So both possibilities are here. Now, if you look at our lifestyle, there has been great change. If you look at families, for instance, we have a high percentage of dysfunctional families now. In the past, the families were close-knit. There was some strong support system. And if you look at, if you engage in discussions on mental health, one of the things you'll discover is that a very strong support system usually is something that either prevents or helps through psychological challenges or crisis. Now that we have lots of dysfunctional families, then this support system is missing. And there is also change in parenting styles. For example, for African families, a kid is usually a community affair. Raising a kid is a community affair. It's a communal affair. A child is everybody's child. Therefore, everybody is expected to support, everybody is expected to discipline, everybody is expected to look out for a kid. But what has happened now is every kid is a family's kid and no one else's business. So the community does not or can no longer look out for, concern itself with somebody else's kid. So the parenting styles have changed, and parents have also become quite overprotective. You see people that have, for example, people that have gone through poverty, or episodes in their lives where they lacked whatever they needed, would want to protect their kids from such episodes, and therefore they have become too overprotective. And too much of everything is usually poisonous, and therefore being so overly protective raises people that are too soft and not so resilient whenever there are challenges in life. And life is challenging, it's dynamic and challenging. And so this definitely contributes to people that are unable to cope with challenges in life and therefore are prone to mental health crisis. Our diet definitely has also changed. Lots of toxins, lots of pollution, and deficiencies. Because sometimes what causes mental health crisis is an imbalance in the mind, imbalance of chemicals in the mind. And so whatever we take in, therefore, has a role to play in how our psychology operates. If you look at the advances in technology and media, there's so much information available, unregulated, overwhelming, not easy to sift through what is credible and what is not. And there is always the issue of a narrative, someone's narrative being driven or pushed. And if someone is not aware of this and therefore able to deal with this, definitely this is like an overdose of information that can create crisis. Social media depression is another phenomena. People posing and posting stuff online, showing their lives as magical, amazing, when it is not, and therefore people wanting to live that life and not being able to live that life, and as a result, getting depressed. And then there is substance abuse, whether out of curiosity, whether used as a coping mechanism against a crisis, a mental crisis, whether it is out of leisure. Substance abuse has a great impact on mental health. And therefore, these things that we've mentioned have played a role in making it seem like there is an upsurge, or making it seem or showing that there really is an upsurge in mental health related cases. We're going to stop here for now until the next episode. This is the end of part 1. Until we start on part 2. Be blessed. Thanks for listening and take care of your mental health.